So, before I even think about going on about some of my other D&D adventures that I've had in, the world of tabletop gaming, I would like to share with you guys about how my first few adventures that I ran as a DM went as a guideline as to how sort of zany sort of shit has gone over the years. So one of the first things I have to tell you guys is that I did not have the first, One of the first things I have to tell you guys is that I did not have the first core books for 3.0, 3.5 when it first came out. I had the Player's Handbook, I had the Dungeon Master's Guide, and then I had the Advanced D&D Monster Manual for 2nd edition. Well, I didn't have it. My friend Link had it. My first session was pretty much just me, Link, and my brother Dylan. And tell you the truth, it was fun, but it was not by the book. Well, it was as by the book as we could possibly make it, because AD&D was so much more different than 3.5. So we pretty much worked with whatever the hell we had. And what we had was not a whole lot. I made our first ever characters, which we still run through this, by the way, because our first ever characters were probably our most fun that we had. And we just wanted to keep on having that same sort of fun. And these characters were 3 catfolk characters. One being Katari, who was played by Link. She was a ninja catfolk, or rogue catfolk, as pretty much as ninja-esque as Link could make her. Black cat, stealthy. She tried to pickpocket a few times, but most of the times they would fail because of how pickpocketing seems to work sometimes. And she did most of the planning. Like, she was always the one to have us sit back for a good 5-10 minutes and go, okay, wait, we need to make a plan. And most of the times the plans would work. I say most because of the other 2 characters. The other was I really didn't have a name for him, but he was a barbarian catfolk. Because, again, I was like 15, 16 and had an infatuation with swords and strong characters like Conan the Barbarian. So naturally I played a barbarian. He was more of a kind of a liger, mix between a lion and a tiger, because we keep on switching back and forth between tiger and lion when we think about describing this character. And his name was Nikosuru. And it pretty much has been shortened down to Nikosuru. But I got the name from looking through this Japanese to English translation book that we had at the time, and was like, okay, we need a name that starts with an N. And so eventually we came to the N section. It was like, oh hey, Nikosuru apparently means smile in Japanese. So, and again, I was a big old weeb back in the day, and not that my channel has shown any less of a signifier of that. And so we got Nikosuru as the barbarian. And then there's my brother, who plays as Boots, or Caboodles, as she's also named, who was a sorceress. Big infatuation with fire. I believe he always designed her as a desert cat of some sort, or one with really light, short fur, kind of like not a jaguar, a crackle. I think that's what they're called. I don't know. It's been forever since we even played the first description of these guys. And the first description of these guys is probably the most pure, as it were, because we pretty much always stuck with 3.5 rules, so that means we always stuck with Pathfinder afterwards. And Pathfinder is cool and everything, but I got some gripes with Pathfinder. I'll probably go into in another video. But first we're focusing on session 0, as it were. So pretty much the first campaigns I always ran with D&D were with the 3.5 Player's Handbook, the 3.5 Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition Monster Manual folder, which was owned by Link. And again, pretty much all of my inspiration for the first sessions was pretty much off the top of my head and whatever the hell was feasible. Let's put it that way. Like, we did our usual run-in with kobolds and the like in these sessions, like AD&D kobolds and AD&D goblins. It was all good stuff. It still worked out. Like, we sort of reverse engineered Thaco so that we could work it with how the rules of 3.5 worked, so we could actually, again, this was back in like 2005, 2006. We did not have constant access to the internet, and when we did have constant access to the internet, we didn't have access to like PDF files and whatnot. We weren't super like piratey, as it were. I didn't like to be the pirate back in the day. I like having my physical books. So, yeah, most of the sessions we ran were like that. We had a bunch of AD&D shit that wouldn't happen, and I won't say that I was a terrible DM, because one of the parts of the DM is to make sure that all the players are having fun. And we had a goddamn blast. Every single weekend, we would go over to Link's house and play a good long session of Dungeons & Dragons. And the shenanigans we always got into were kind of ridiculous. But here's an example of just a little bit of how bad of a DM I might be considered. So one session, I forget what exactly led up to it, but we had essentially gone into this arena sort of situation. We had to fight a bunch of monsters consecutively. I think around that time we were level 5 or so, which, kind of a big deal to us at the time, because, we didn't play a whole lot of the time, or we were playing video games. And we went through the gamut of the usual, carrying crawlers, minotaur, bunch of tigers and whatnot, which I think one of them Nekosuru had friended. I don't recall off the top of my head, but in any case. So eventually it got to the point where I made it like the Roman Emperor guy, yes, Roman Emperor guy, was all pissed off and trying to thumbs down us and make sure that we die, which I think Link had pointed out that was historically accurate. It was only the people that were going to die that were getting the thumbs down and whatnot, but I digress. Again, I was a stupid kid. And eventually the Roman Emperor guy was like, send out the Tarrasque. And both Link and Dylan were like, what? Because all we knew from all about the Tarrasque was really the flavor text and whatnot that they had in them. Was that they were super monstrous beasts that loved devouring things, and apparently the only thing that really got stuck in my head as a DM at the time was the fact that the Tarrasque, according to the second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons handbook, was that the Tarrasque's stomach was lined with jewels and precious gemstones. So, for some reason, I thought that was a good idea, and I don't remember how exactly, but again, bad DMing shit. My brother had shot a bunch of rays at it, and I had ruled it that since he was firing the rays at his face instead of the carapace, he would get a minus to the attack, but again, since it was a touch-based spell, Ray of Enfeeblement, that was it, which reduces the character's strength. So he casted Ray of Enfeeblement a shit ton of times on him, until he had like a strength of 20, I think. I think that Tarrasque had like strength of, well, in the 3.5 books, the equivalent of 20 as opposed to the equivalent of 50. Put it that way. So eventually, I was reading back through the book, reminding myself of the stats and whatnot. It's like, so in real, it had been a couple of rounds, and for some reason, the Tarrasque had been getting god awful rolls, hitting Katari and Nekosuru. And eventually, I read through the book a little bit more. I was like, oh hey guys, you remember that the Tarrasque has a stomach lined in jewelry, right? So we were trying to formulate some sort of plans to get the jewelry out of the Tarrasque, which during this time, by the way, they were like still fighting the Tarrasque, and eventually though, it got one good solid hit on one of the characters. I want to say it was Katari, because I always played Nekosuru as the kind to take a hit and give it back, whereas I think Link always played Katari as the kind to take a hit and then run the hell away, because, you know, Katari, thief, not exactly gonna want to take that damage again. So I think one of the fights prior to that fight was a bunch of chariots. Yeah, I think it was a bunch of chariots that they were fighting against. So he hopped into one of them. Nekosuru followed suit, and I think my brother had to get his own chariot, and we ran out of the Colosseum. It was like, okay, we need a plan to get that money and not die. Boots was quite happy with the idea of this plan, and just wanted a good fight, because again, I played him as stereotypical want to fight everything barbarian. So at that point, the Tarrasque had burst out of the side of the Colosseum and started running amok. Started chasing after the party, who was still lobbing fireballs, throwing axes, and whatever the hell we else had in the toolkits, because again, I think Link had played Katari much like a ninja, and well, I think he had a bunch of throwing knives, shurikens, whatnots. I think we had the complete warrior at that time, which was it was a book in the 3.5 complete series of books, which was a fascinating book. Like, some of the core classes in that were sucky, but some of the prestige classes were, hell yes, please give us more. So there was a bunch of weapons and feats and whatnot from that, but I'm not sure how much those had helped. So eventually I had ruled, eventually though, the Tarrasque's health whittled down to nothing. So he was at 0 HP, pretty much 0 HP, yeah. He was at 0 HP, and the party was like, okay, walk into the mouth, collect as much as we possibly can, and GTFO before, like, authorities come. So, did that, and what kind of sucked afterwards, though, is that, keep in mind, we were a level of, like, 3 level 5 catfolks against the Tarrasque. And what I constantly had forgotten during that fight was the regeneration factor of the Tarrasque. Yeah, the regeneration factor of the Tarrasque, which, according to the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Handbook, the sucker is immune to all heat and fire and regenerates lost hit points at a rate of 1 hit point per round. So, and only enchanted weapons had any effect on him. So, the only thing I remember doing was, yeah, that's right, was that we had just walked into his throat and scraped a bunch of jewelry off and into sacks and whatnot, and then ran out. It was that Kit and Boots had walked into the throat. One of the two. Actually, I'm pretty sure Boots didn't want to do that because, ew, icky. Point is, 2 of us went in to scrape off a bunch of jewels and gemstones from its stomach and walk out stinking goddamn rich. While the other one was sitting there with like a +1 dagger or something at its eyeball, just stabbing it, then watching it regenerate, then stabbing it and watching it regenerate. That was probably one of our most fun campaigns, too, because that also involved a legendary artifact that we had made. Collectively we had made. That was based off of a item found in the very, very, very early chapters of a webcomic called Mega Tokyo. But anyways, so this item was called the Cool Thing. It was a spherical metal object that constantly like twisted and turned and changed its composition and was comprised of different metals. Sometimes it appeared as like metal plates carefully wrapped together, sometimes just as a solid sphere. And it had we literally had no idea what the hell it was going to do when it activated next. Now you would ask, oh, but since you're the DM, wouldn't you make up whatever random shit that it did? Yes, but I always did it on a chart. So the first iteration of the Cool Thing, as it was called, we had comprised of a list of 10 different things it could do. It was simple, very basic sort of D&D stuff that led from 1 being really bad and 10 to being really good. Like, I think 1 I had, and of course it was extremely inspired by video games as well. So it wasn't just plain old, +4 strength. It was like gain Cool Thing becomes a Buster Sword sort of stuff. Damn it, I really wish that I could find the ruling on it though. Because last I remember, it had gotten somewhere around 100 different effects from the last time that we had played the Catfolk campaign. And again, a lot of them were inspired by video games. Like, they weren't just or not even video games, just real life sometimes as well. Like, you didn't get 6 potions of haste. You got 6 cans of some potion that was labeled Red Bull. You didn't just get a +1 Sword. You got like a +1 Sword that happened to look like some video game character's weapon, or temporarily summon extra planar. temporarily summon a celestial teenager with a bow that can magically transform into 2 daggers, or temporarily summon a a character with long hair by the name of Leon who had a gun. Shit like that. And it's probably the latest campaign, latest version of this campaign, though, that ended up being the better of events that happened with it. So Kit, Nekosuru, and Boots had finally come back from a mission. I forget the exact events. Like, I had made this cool little thing where some sea drakes were breeding with some sort of abominations and making these like sea slug-esque dragons. It was a cool thing, but I think my brother had fallen asleep at that time. So the next session was where we had ended up finding the cool thing again. Still level 1 or 2, I think, at that time. And eventually we got back into town and had our homestead, all that fun stuff. Chilling out, just randomly using the cool thing to summon up this thing, summon up that thing, dealing with this monster that suddenly rampages out of the house. And eventually, and again, since this one is the 3.5 version, so it's been updated with a bunch of horrible nasties from the Pathfinder books. Most notably the Bestiary 2, which had a terrible beast based off of the Alice in Wonderland stories, the Jabberwock. So, I made that result number 000 out of a roll of a D100. And sure enough, it was like 2 or 3 weeks after having put that result onto the thing, did it come out. I described it as, you guys have a sudden terrible feeling as a, what was the sound it was? Yeah, where I had made a great whiffling noise, whatever the frick a whiffling noise is, through some woods that were nearby, and they almost immediately knew what the hell was going on. And it was that the Jabberwocky was going to be hunting them down for a while. They were level, 6. I think it was that they were level 6. And, knowing that this thing was coming around, they had decided to skip town. Because, the town would have been destroyed and the Jabberwocky would have been probably gone in 2 to 3 weeks, in theory. And they were just like, yeah, screw that noise. We're not fighting a freaking Jabberwocky, which in the Bestiary 2, I believe, is a good old hearty CR 20. A challenge rating of 20. And they were just like, collectively, screw that. So we walked out. So we pretty much walked out of the town. Got a few days out. And sort of ritual with the cool thing is that since it's only once per day per person, the cool thing gets handed around the fireside or around the living room, and everyone that is present gets to roll for it. And at this point, it was like, okay, seeing as we're out of city limits now, well, let's see what sort of chaos we'll do that won't kill the townspeople. So, naturally, roll again. Some +2 flaming hand axe, some equipment in their thing suddenly gets +1. And then there was the final roll. I forgot who did the final roll, but it was the best roll. Because this best roll, out of a roll of 100, didn't summon another Jabberwock. No. What had happened was that it had from the fireplace that they were all sitting around, there was a mighty explosion, and there sitting in the fireplace was the sharpest sword that anyone had ever seen. It was a +1 Vorpal longsword. Which, if you know your 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons bullshit, the Jabberwock is really afraid of. Out of all of the things that they could possibly have rolled, all the nasty things, out of possibly getting themselves another Jabberwocky stuck right up their asses, they had instead summoned the one thing the Jabberwock has a fear of, because when it would be hit by a Vorpal weapon, Jabberwockies get shaken, which, you know, this is generally -2 to everything. And when, of course, the Vorpal sword is to be feared in the first place, because a Vorpal sword is, you roll a 20, that person dies. Because you've decapitated them. It is freaking legendary among weaponry, and it bypasses all the Jabberwock's damage reduction, all of that fun shit. But negates their fast healing for a while. I think it did. I don't know, let me look it up real quick. As soon as, okay. Knows that a Vorpal weapon can kill it swiftly. As soon as it takes damage from a Vorpal weapon, a Jabberwock becomes shaken for a round. If it is hit by a critical threat from the Vorpal weapon, whether or not the critical hit is confirmed, the Jabberwock is staggered for a round. Okay, so it's not like he instantaneously dies or all of his defenses get negated, but it does bypass his damage reduction. It doesn't stop his fast healing, but, you know, with Nekosuru wielding the damn thing, the fast healing probably wouldn't have mattered too long anyways. So, the party decides, you know what, we got the Vorpal sword, we might as well get our goddamn city back. So, ride back into town and formulate some sort of plan. Like, I think the plan was to somehow capture and pull down the Jabberwock to a point where either Nekosuru, which by the way his nickname was In, have In pull, you know, get close enough to give him a good whack with the Vorpal sword, because the idea was that if someone can hit him with the Vorpal sword, then the Jabberwock would go away and wouldn't bother us for several weeks, and it would disappear. Which I believe was the role of the cool thing, that the Jabberwock was going to hunt down the party for several days, like 2d6 or something like that. So through this elaborate plan of getting the Jabberwock to get down as close as possible and using some sort of large fishing net, we held down the Jabberwock just next to this one building that Nekosuru was hanging out on top of. And sure enough, Nekosuru threaded a crit. He didn't make a full crit though, because freaking Jabberwock has an AC of 40. Like 35 when it's flat-footed. And the Jabberwock was not happy with that. So, pretty much the instant that he had been hit with it, he threw Nekosuru to the ground and was like, I'm out of here, see ya, pew! And buzzed off as fast as he could with net still over his head and all that. And I couldn't have the party keep a freaking Vorpal sword. Like, even if they sold it, that would break the market alone. So pretty much as soon as the Jabberwock, in a few days afterwards, when the Jabberwocky had left the material world, then the Vorpal sword itself kind of faded from existence, as though it was returning from whence it came.
Do come back.
So yeah, that's pretty much the description of how most of my campaigns, when they get ran off the top of my head, go. And that was also a description of the very first campaign. That is the Kit in Caboodle campaign. As well as the introduction, well, not the introduction, but you guys now get the general gist of what playing a campaign with a completely random artifact like the cool thing is. So if you like this video, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, all that crap, blah blah blah. And I will be doing more D&D stories past December, not just D&D December, because I do love telling me some of these stories. So thank you all for listening and watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Cheers.